So I grew up in the early 2000s, which, if you ask me, was a prime time for children's television content. However, my viewing content was much different than that of my peers, and that is because I did not have cable. Now, you wouldn't think that not having cable has such an impact on a person, but it does. Not having cable has become a personality trait, and I feel like people without cable can all relate to this because as you get older, you start to realize how many references, especially to SpongeBob, people are making. I've never seen SpongeBob, but the amount of times people are referencing that show just in everyday conversation baffles me. So, because I didn't have cable, my television viewing was centered around PBS Kids. Now, PBS Kids had some great shows. It also had some not so great shows. So, I decided to make a YouTube trendy tier list, and I was going to rank all of the TV shows that I remember watching from just worst to best. Also, if you've seen some of my other content, you know that I like to dress up for whatever I'm reviewing. So today I tried to do a peak Sarah early 2000s look. Obviously, in this photo here, I am rocking the look much better than I am now. I was really pulling off the pigtails, which I'm struggling to do now. And the dress that I'm wearing is by far, hands down, my favorite piece of clothing I have ever owned. I loved that dress so much. Now, there are a few factors that go into the shows that I actually chose. One is obviously the era that I was watching a lot of shows, which was from the early 2000s to 2010-ish. So that's where most of the shows that I watch fall, either in reruns or that's when they were released. Also, the time that I was allowed to watch TV was pretty strict. I was allowed to watch it in the morning before school, and then I was allowed to watch it after school from 4 o'clock until 5 o'clock when we had dinner. So because of that, the amount of shows that I was watching was more limited. So there are definitely shows that I left off this list, and they just happen to be ones that I never actually watched. And that's usually just because they were airing at a time when I wasn't watching. That being said, we still have a hefty amount of shows here. So here's my YouTube Trendy tier list. And starting at the bottom, we have F, which would mean that I turned off the TV if this show came on. Now, I didn't have many options. If I wasn't watching PBS Kids, there's pretty much no other stations to watch. So turning off the TV was pretty dramatic. So then we have D. So this is that the show was trash. It was bad, but I would watch it, but I would watch it begrudgingly. C is that I really just had no strong opinions. It was pretty meh, pretty blah. I mean, it wasn't the worst show ever, but I mean, it also wasn't the best. So next we have B, and this was the shows that were good and that I was just content with them being on. And then A, this is very good. Now, these shows, they were almost my favorite, but not quite. Which brings us to S tier. And these were just...
Oh, that was crazy. I've never actually experienced that sort of atmosphere again before. It's absolutely electric. The passion, everything we've seen from both sets of fans.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started ranking our TV shows. First up, we have Barney. Barney was F. I hated Barney. I was terrified of him. He was a creepy guy in this big purple costume. He talked really creepily. And I just was not a fan. If Barney came on, the TV went off. Next up, we have the Berenstein Bears, which, unlike Barney, I loved. The Berenstein Bears is going right up into very good. I thought it was such a cute show. I remember I had all of the books too. So watching it on TV was really cool. Next up, we have Between the Lions. Now, Between the Lions, I don't remember as well as some of the other shows, but I remember being pretty terrified of their faces. I'm pretty sure they were puppets or maybe Muppets, but I was terrified. So these are going in Matt. I was going to put it in D, but I don't think it was a trash show. I remember watching it and thinking it was fine, but also in the back of my mind, I was pretty terrified of these guys. So next up we have The Big Comfy Couch. Now most people that were born in the 90s and 2000s remember The Big Comfy Couch, and it was definitely a staple childhood show, and I loved it. I remember even going to the library and buying the DVDs of this show because it was that good. So this is immediately going up into very good. I loved this show, but I will say looking back, it's a little creepy, but that doesn't matter. I loved it as a kid. So next up, we have Bob the Builder. We have our second F. I did not like Bob the Builder. I thought this theme song was really annoying.
Bob the Builder, can we fix it? Bob the Builder, yes we can!
Anytime it was on, immediately I just shut off the TV. I couldn't even tell you like what this show was about, other than like there's a guy named Bob and he was building, because I turned it off the second I heard that theme song. Next up we have Caillou. Now, I feel like Caillou belongs in like DRF, but I have to be honest and I have to put it up in good. Honestly, I would almost put it in A. I loved Caillou. Caillou was not a good show, but I loved it. He's just such a whiny kid, and I feel like the messages in the shows were never that great. But nevertheless, I loved it. I thought it was a great show, so I have to be true to who I was as a child, and I have to put it in good. So next up, we have Clifford the Big Red Dog. Now, Clifford, I wasn't a huge fan of. It wasn't a bad show. I'm gonna probably put it in meh because I just wasn't that big of a fan of it. But that being said, I did really like that he was a red dog. I was really obsessed with the color red. It was my favorite color. So just the fact that he was a red dog already had me somewhat liking it. But when it came down to like the actual story, I remember being pretty bored watching it. So next up, we have Curious George. Curious George is very good. I loved Curious George. I thought it was such a cute show. I actually remember one time when I was like at home sick, which was one of the few times I was able to watch TV like all day long. I remember that the Curious George movie was like premiering on PBS Kids, and I was just wonderstruck. I remember sitting there in like a fever dream watching Curious George, and it was just like best day of my life despite the fact that I was sick. And I honestly watched the Curious George movie recently, and it holds up. Like, that movie is just pure joy. So next up, we have our first S-Class, Cyber Chase.
It's absolutely electric.
I loved Cyber Chase. This show had drama. It had math. These characters were always like getting thrown in crazy scenarios. They were getting hijinksed and having to defeat that evil guy with the long face. I don't remember his name, but he was a good villain. And then there was Motherboard, I think that was her name, but she was like the lady and she was like the big computer face, and she was always like sending them on missions. And I remember there's like one episode that has like this crazy cliffhanger. It's like a two-parter because the evil guy like takes over. Oh, that show was so good. So next up on our list, we have Dinosaur Train. Dinosaur Train is going in trash. I wasn't a fan of Dinosaur Train. I definitely think part of it was like I wasn't the right age. It was definitely geared towards like a younger audience, and by the time it came out, I was a little bit older. And I remember just like not really liking the story. It was just about like these two kids and they're like family, and they go on like this train. And I think they like study history, or like they study dinosaurs. And I just wasn't into dinosaurs, and I feel like at some level I had to be somewhat into dinosaurs to appreciate the show. Okay, I kind of take back what I said about the dinosaurs, because next up we have Dragon Tales. And I love Dragon Tales. Maybe I was into dinosaurs, but these were dragons, not dinosaurs, so it's different. But nevertheless, I loved it. I thought Dragon Tales was so good. They had that magic rock that they would like wish on, and then like they would go to this magic realm. I remember the theme song was super catchy. I'm pretty sure they were just like repeating Dragon Tales like over 100 times. But nevertheless, it was serving. I love Dragon Tales. I really thought that if I picked up a rock and like wished on it, I was going to this dragon land. It never happened. I was disappointed, but the show was still great. So next up, we have two TV shows that I almost left out, but I did confirm that they did air on PBS Kids, but it was like a weird airing. And that's what I remember. I remember on Sundays, PBS Kids like wasn't on the PBS station for some reason, but that they would air these two cartoons. And it was Anne of Green Gables and Wonderkin Little Amadeus. These two shows made up my childhood. I loved these two shows. Now, to be fair, I didn't have many other options. Like on Sundays, if I wanted to watch like a children's television show, it was these two or nothing. But nevertheless, they were great. They are going up into A class. I also want to point out that Wonderkin Little Amadeus has such a good intro song.
Little Amadeus, 2 centuries ago. Little Amadeus, the star of Rococo. Master of harmonies, beautiful melodies, operas and symphonies, each one a masterpiece.
And the intro song is honestly iconic. So speaking of iconic intro songs, we have Maya and Miguel next.
It's Maya and Miguel. What they will do next, you never can tell. It's Maya and Miguel. Brother and sister and best friends as well.
Maya and Miguel are going up in good. I was almost going to put them in very good, but I honestly don't remember the show that much. This was one of those shows that came on at like 5 o'clock when I usually stopped watching TV. So I would usually get like the intro and that iconic intro song. However, the parts of the show that I did watch, I thought it was great. I thought it was a really great show. It was really fun. And again, like that intro song just made it iconic. So next up, we have Martha Speaks, and I loved Martha Speaks. I thought it was a really fun show. I don't think it was like PBS Kids' best show, but I thought it was really cool that this dog like ate some alphabet soup and could now speak. It was a really clever premise, and it made for some really interesting content. It was definitely unlike some of the other stuff that they were putting out, and I thought it was better than Clifford, which sort of had like that same idea of like a dog being a main character. But in this case, the dog could talk, which made it really fun. So next up, we have Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers, but you're going in meh. I was not a fan. To be fair, I really liked the intro and the ending, but the part in between I really didn't like. I thought it was really creepy. I just wasn't a fan of puppets. Sort of like with the Between the Lions, like the puppets really creeped me out. And I really liked Mr. Rogers though. I thought he was a really friendly guy, and I liked when he sang his song and he was like putting his shoes on. That was the best part of the show in my opinion. So next up, we have our next S class, and that is Arthur.
It's absolutely electric.
I love Arthur. Arthur was honestly probably my favorite show. I remember Arthur aired in like the prime time that I was watching TV from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And I will say there are some Arthur episodes that I really, really love, and also some ones that I don't love, but overall, like the series is just too iconic to not put in S class. I will say that like the early seasons, those are what belong in S class. Like there are some like middle seasons and like the new ones that they've come out with, they do not belong up here. When I'm talking about S class, I'm talking about those early seasons, especially like Arthur's birthday. That was a great episode. When Arthur got chicken pox, I really like that one. So next up, we have Peep and the Big Wide World. And this show is going up in good. I really liked Peep and the Big Wide World. I don't even think they talked in that show, but I remember just like, I don't know, the shapes and the colors were really fun. I really liked the stories. They were super simple, I think. They honestly might have only been like 5 or 10 minute shows, but I just remember loving it. I thought it was super cute. It was super fun. Next up, we have The Electric Company. They're going in trash. I almost want to put them in F class, but to be fair, I would begrudgingly watch them when they were on. Now, The Electric Company came on at like 5 o'clock, which usually I had stopped watching TV, so I didn't get subjected to it that often. But there's those few days where dinner was late and I had to watch The Electric Company. It was about like these group of kids and they had like superpowers, but like their superpowers were super lame. It was just like that they could spell things. I also remember vividly that there's an episode with Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Get down, get up and go, cause guess who's in town? It's me, the hard G. Silent E is a ninja. Silent E is a ninja. Now, once upon a time not long ago, when people read books and lived life slow.
And peace and love, I'm a Hamilton. I love Hamilton. I think most fans of Hamilton can agree that Mr. Miranda was not serving. And I've seen Hamilton on stage when Mr. Miranda was not playing the main character, and the show is a million times better. No hate. The musical's great. Voice, not so much.
Silent E is a ninja.
So next up is It's a Big, Big World. And this show's going in meh. For a very similar reason as Between the Lions. It was just like the puppets that were in there that were freaking me out. I will say, I did like the sloth guy, even though he was like a puppet guy. I really liked him. I thought like he was a pretty cool guy. But other than that, I don't remember too much about the show. I just remember being pretty creeped out by the puppets. So speaking of puppets, we have our Muppets, the Sesame Street. This one, I would turn off the TV. I did not like Sesame Street. I honestly feel like it could have been that like it was geared towards younger kids, but even like when I was really young, I hated Sesame Street. I do remember that one part of Sesame Street that I did like was Elmo at the end, and it was just like the Elmo show, and it was only like 5 minutes, and he would like feed his goldfish, and that was pretty much it. But I can't count that because I would usually turn off the TV before even getting to that part. The only time I would watch Sesame Street is if I had timed it like where I was only watching that Elmo part. But other than that, TV was going off, wasn't a fan. So next we have Sid the Science Kid. Sorry, Sid, but you are trash. I would watch it begrudgingly, but yeah, Sid the Science Kid, wasn't a fan. The characters were kind of annoying, and I also just wasn't that into science, and obviously he's a science kid. The show's revolving around science, but it just wasn't my jam, wasn't a fan of it. So also going with shows that I wasn't a fan of, we have Super Y. I did not like Super Y. Super Y was honestly worse than Sid the Science Kid in my opinion. Now, I feel like for a similar reason to me not liking Dinosaur Train is that this show came out a little bit later, where it's definitely geared towards like a younger audience. But again, I would watch it begrudgingly, wasn't a fan though. So next up we have Teletubbies. Teletubbies was great. I loved Teletubbies. Now I feel like this is a little bit surprising, especially by how creeped out I was by like Between the Lions and It's a Big Big World. But Teletubbies was good. I love Teletubbies. Looking back, yeah, they're pretty creepy. But honestly, I remember I wasn't that scared of them. I was scared of the baby son a little bit, which I mean, who wasn't? But I will say, like, I have a vivid memory of my favorite episode, and it's when there's like a vacuum and there are cookies exploding everywhere, and he has to like suck up the cookies. Great episode. Next, we have Thomas and Friends. Thomas and Friends is going in F. I did not like Thomas and Friends. I genuinely don't think I've watched a single episode of it. But I remember the second that that show would come on and his creepy face was on a train, I was out. TV went off. So next we have another show that I wasn't a fan of. That is Wildcats. Wildcats is going in D. I almost want to put it in F, but I have seen the show, so I have watched it. The TV didn't go off when it came on. But similar to the Electric Company, the Wildcats, I'm pretty sure actually replaced that show, and it just wasn't good. I'm not a huge fan of shows like focused around animals. I remember like these two brothers, and they could like change into animals, and every once in a while it's like somewhat interesting where I think they'd have to like stop a villain, but most of the time it's just them turning into animals and learning about the animal, and that just wasn't my vibe. But next up we have Word Girl. Word Girl was good, not very good, but it was good. I liked Word Girl. I thought it was super fun. The villains were really cool. I remember there was like a guy, and he had like a big brain, and he was like a scientist. I think it was like a hamburger guy. And there's like a businessman. I think his name was Mr. Big.
What your nickname is? Mr. Big.
But yeah, Word Girl was fun. I don't exactly remember her powers, but I think that had something to do with words, where like she just said like a big word, and the villain was like, no. But it was great. I loved it. I thought it was such a fun show. So speaking of words, we have Word World next, which going up in good. I really liked Word World. I thought it was such a fun show. I remember like you could put words together and like it turned into what that word was. So super clever, was a fan. I remember once when I was little, I actually cut out words and threw them around my lawn and thought that they would turn into things. I was just littering, really. I did pick them up. And lastly, we have Fetch with Ruff Ruffman, which is our final S class.
It's absolutely electric.
I loved Fetch. Fetch honestly might have been my favorite PBS Kids show. All three of these were, but Fetch just was on another level. It was basically like a reality show, but for kids, and it was just so fun. I think it only had like 5 seasons. It deserved more. It was such a good show. Whoever was playing Ruff, he was serving. All the kids were super fun. They got to do super fun challenges. I remember my favorite episodes when they go to a haunted mansion. There's also a fun CSI episode. It was just all around such a great show. All right, so here we are. Here's our final tier list. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to this tier list down in the description. If you want, go ahead and rank these shows yourself. Also, let me know, do you even remember some of these shows? I feel like Anne of Green Gables and Wonderkin Little Amadeus are so obscure, and I would just love to know if anyone else has watched these shows. But yeah, at the end of the day, PBS Kids was serving us cableless kids with some great content.